NFTs and the future of fan clubs. I'm Patrick. I'm the head of digital and business development for Fuse, which is a entertainment network. We're in 50 million homes across the US on cable. We have a subscription streaming service. We have free ad-supported streaming television channels. And we did an NFT project in January, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But a lot of my background's in building fan communities and fan clubs. So to start, and I'm not going to get too into the academics of all of this, but as far as like the definition of fan club, there's one key sort of phrase in this that I'll come back to throughout the presentation I think is very important, and it's the idea of a shared interest. So I like something, you like something, she likes something, together we have a shared interest, and that's what we become fans of. It's not just that I like something, but that there is a shared interest in that, and that's how we get to the idea of fandom. So if you look at the history of fandom, which is kind of interesting, and this is the only history lesson on the slide and in the presentation, but about 500 years ago, when Europe sort of unified its monetary system, people started to buy more things. They started buying things that they like, not just the things that they need, but things that they just thought was interesting, maybe a decorative artifact or some kind of fabric that they were interested in. Fast forward 100 years, and they start collecting these things. Not only do I want one decorative candle holder, but I want 20 of those. And then people start gathering on that. Oh, you like candle holders too? Cool, let's all talk about candle holders, and let's start to develop our tastes around what we think is nice, a nice candle holder. Or what are the best ones? Fast forward another 100 years, and you start to see the emergence of brands around these types of things. So there's an early purveyor of fine dining where John Wedgwood, which Wedgwood is a brand that's still sold today in Bloomingdale's, was a really early modern day brand marketer who even used essentially influencer marketing to get celebrities to endorse his brand of this dining ware that then became this brand that people realized that, oh, we all like the same brand. We all like Wedgwood. And then over the next 200 years, you see sort of like the explosion of what we now know as popular culture, right? So you have the Industrial Revolution, you have mass communication, so you have things that become much more accessible to wider populations and the discoverability of those things. And you have people who, and great crowds of people who all have the same shared interests rather than local communities. And so from that, you have things like mass publishing, and Sherlock Holmes becomes one of the first literary characters that people build this fandom around. And then you have things that are a little bit more modern, from Shirley Temple to the Beatles and to Star Wars. And that's when this idea of fan club starts taking shape. And then consumer internet comes around, all this fandom moves online, right? Everything moves online. And it starts to move online. Anybody my age or older probably remembers GeoCities and either had a GeoCities page of something they were a fan of or visited GeoCities pages of things they were fans of. But these were all sort of walled gardens, right? There were forums, there were sites, there were these things where you would go, you would visit, maybe you'd register for an account. All that fandom was locked up in a walled garden in a website. And then social comes around, sort of disaggregates all this, sucks it all up into their platforms, and you have things like liking a Facebook page or following someone that you are a fan of, and instead of this rewarding fan experience, all these social platforms really kind of did was suck that all up and sell it to advertisers. So it hasn't been a really great sort of fan experience. So today, fandom is sort of changing, I think, in what I find to be two interesting ways. And those are the financialization of everything and the adoption of blockchain and Web3. So we'll talk about the first thing because I think it's important, the financialization of everything, which is basically that everything is becoming investable, right? Whether it's sneakers or a dinosaur skull or a CryptoPunk or a first edition copy of Super Mario Bros. 3, you can take $1 and with fractionalization you can put it in anything. And so what is now things that you are fans of are also things you can invest in. And so that adds a whole other layer of fandom to these things, which is very cool. And so you start to see that investing is cultural. Like the idea of just being an investor is cultural. And you have something like Soul Savvy, which are sneaker investors who are also very passionate about just sneakers in general. Or you have the fact that AMC took advantage of the fact that it was a meme stock and then created a fan club called Investor Connect where investors could get free popcorn. And starting to build fandom around the fact that you're an investor in AMC. So that, I think, is one of the key trends. The other, the adoption of blockchain and Web3, which is more of the interesting stuff for us and what we're here for, but this starts to look familiar, right? A new monetary system with crypto that leads to buying and collecting the things that we like. Who doesn't like JPEGs, right? Like, we're like, oh, you like this, I like this is cool, let's all gather around this, let's start collecting these things. And that's why this is sort of like a very early use case for crypto, is it's collecting. Not a surprise. And then what happens is we all start to gather, and we start to gather in bigger and bigger in groups, and then what happens is these things become brands. Shining example of this is the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Raised however many hundreds of millions of dollars, billion-dollar brand now, right? It's the next Supreme, whatever it happens to be. But it didn't take very long because of the internet, but this is what is exactly as history repeating itself, these things becoming their own brands. So what happens now is that fandom itself is becoming a financialized asset, which is super fascinating to me. So these tokens represent our fandom. So let's say you're a fan of Disney, and you spend your money because you're going to the theme park, or you're subscribing to Disney Plus, or you're going to the theater to watch the latest Avengers movie. That's a one-way financial transaction. Your experience as a fan, your value is just whatever it is that you paid for, right? But you stick a token in the middle of that, you stick some kind of collectible, virtual collectible, that has value, that it can be redeemed, it's transactional, it can change with time. And then that fandom, that representation of your fandom actually has some value to it. You could invest in it. It can change, it can become more rare. You can sell it to somebody else, ostensibly, if the brand, like a Disney, decides that that's something that they want to participate in. You could see that happening with all kinds of consumer brands. So what this creates is actually a two-way value exchange for fandom. So the more that I invest in something as a fan, the more that my fandom actually becomes valuable, which is a little bit of a kind of an interesting and new concept. So Fuse, the company that I work for, we did a NFT drop in January with a company called Theta Labs, and we did it around a show called The Marla Negras Don't Cancel Me. She has a couple million followers on Instagram. She's got her own fan base. Fuse has fans. And we decided to release an NFT project that, along with it, you would get a lifetime subscription to Fuse Plus, our subscription streaming service, so you could watch the show, you can watch other things that we're doing, as long as you hold the NFT. Some of those NFTs came with redeemables, like a limited edition designed hoodie from a social justice artist named Fabiana Rodriguez, who's amazing. And now we're starting to think about what else can we add to the value of being a fan of Fuse. And from our standpoint, we're thinking about, okay, if these are people who are coming to watch what we're about, and what we're about is empowering underrepresented voices in entertainment, people really like to have some kind of influence on that. So can we bring them in? Can we have them give us feedback on what they thought of the show? Can we have them give them a sneak peek of the season 2 of the next season of Amara Lenigas Don't Cancel Me? Can we set up a Zoom call with Amara where she can talk with her biggest fans around the show? It's about investing in that fandom and creating this tokenized version of what it means to be a Fuse fan, and Fuse investing in it as the fans invest in it, so that the value of that fandom as an asset becomes more valuable. And so the other thing about this is the question that I think has come up a lot throughout this conference, which is, I think, is a really good question, is why does this thing need to be an NFT? Like, what's the purpose of it being an NFT? And I think there's 3 ingredients that maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be an NFT, but why NFTs are the perfect application for this sort of thing. And one is they're unique. That's the whole non-fungibleness of it all. It's verifiable, so it's a public record. You can see it. It has a history. You can look at it. It's immutable, no matter where you are or what you're looking at, what lens you're looking at it through. And it's interoperable. So back to the idea of the walled gardens in the early internet, which is I worked for an agency that would spin up these fan communities on websites for. One of our earliest campaigns was for Assassin's Creed, the original version of the game. After Ubisoft decided to stop funding that fan community, it would get torn down, somebody's fandom disappears, right? So you think they go to some other third-party chat room and talk about all the things they did and how much they were a fan of this thing. But now you can take that fandom and you can take it to any site or application. You can take it offline, you can take it to events, and it's yours. It's ownable. It's an asset. And that's what I think is really fascinating of thinking of NFTs as a backbone for the future of fandom. So as we talk about the future of fandom, that's where it kind of all leads, and you're starting to see more of this stuff. So Doja Cat did a big fan experience NFT, all kinds of ways to access her in person, see her concert, get some of her merch. V-Friends, I think, which is probably one of the more salient projects, is a glorified fan club for Gary Vaynerchuk. He's got all of those types of mechanics built into that system, and he's done it extremely well. Bella Hadid has just announced her Cybellas project, which is it's a fan club that's based in Web3, ways that you can connect with her around the things that she's personally interested in. She's going to set up events where you can go and meet her, and by owning one of these Cybellas, you are showing that you are a fan of hers. You could sell that fandom if you decide to at a later point. And that little green W is a side project I'm working around in the craft beer space, which anybody who's interested in craft beer can come talk to me after. It's something that I'm kind of excited about, but I think the biggest pieces of this is you'll start to see the more participation, access, and connection around fandom, and that fandom itself becoming an asset. It's a financialized token that can be sold, which is, I mean, think about the things you're the biggest fan of. How much money have you spent as part of your fandom for something? And if that brand or that service or that person had tokenized that for you, and you could somehow use that for more access or to sell it to somebody else, for example, you're now seeing this two-way value exchange for fandom. And what that's going to do, I mean, you look at the last 500 years where fandom has come today, it feels kind of like we're just getting started with fandom. And the future for what fandom could be as a financialized asset is huge. That's it.